colors don't exist in a vacuum. And in our convenient digital age, we sometimes forget that. You see, our perception of a color changes depending on its context and what other colors are in proximity. Here's a fun example. Which square is darker? The one on the left or the one on the right? If I were to bet, I'd put my money that the one on the left is darker, right? Wrong. Because of the colors surrounding them, the square on the left looks a lot darker than the one on the right. But taken out of context, we can see that they are exactly the same color. And here's an example of how value can mess with our brains. Now the long rectangle appears to be darker on the left and then gradually get lighter as you move right. Right? Wrong again. It's just one value the whole way. But the gradient behind it tricks our minds into thinking otherwise. Are you starting to believe in this magic? Okay, so we know the context of a color changes how we perceive it in a major way. It's almost like an optical illusion. And that makes working with color kind of tricky, but also kind of awesome. So let's look at how you can use this to your advantage. Here's a classic painting by Thomas Gainsborough, The Blue Boy. So let's just take a moment and look at this painting. We can see for the most part, it's pretty dark, and except, there's this dominant figure in the center who's wearing what I can only imagine is a bright baby blue velvet suit of some sort. It's not a very colorful image overall, except for that darn blue suit. And then there's, a little pink on his cheeks and some red on his lips. But everything else kind of like falls flat. But these colors do look very, very bright. However, I'd like to test that theory. So let's sample these colors to really see what's going on. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a new layer over here in Photoshop, okay? And then I'm going to hit B to go to the brush tool, right? Now I have my brush here like this, okay? And we're gonna use the color sampler in Photoshop. And the easiest way to use that and do what we're doing is if you're on the brush tool and you hold Option, like with this, you can see that the little cursor changes to the eyedropper when you're holding Option, okay? So we're gonna use that to sample a color, right? And then we'll make a little swatch for it right here. Okay, so let's start with the brightest colors we can find. So I'm gonna start with his lips right here because this looks like a pretty bright red. So I'm gonna sample it and then I'm gonna make a little color swatch right here. And then maybe I'll pick up some pink from his cheeks and then we'll put that here, okay? Now, the really colorful part of this painting is obviously the blue. So I'm gonna try to look for the most kind of bright blue I can find. So I'm gonna sample maybe something like over here, okay? I'll put a little mark there. And then maybe, oh yeah, this looks like it's really, really blue down here. So I'm gonna go in here and get like this, maybe this. Okay, some more blue. And then what else? There's like a really bright blue down here by a shoe. Okay, so I'll put that over here. And yeah, okay. I think that's a good place to start. Just for fun, let's pick up this like white on his scarf too, okay? We'll get that. I'll put it right there. All right, so we have some color samples. Now what I want to do is I want to look at these colors and study them, but out of context of this painting. Because if we look at the painting, we're like, wow, what a bright blue. His cheeks are so pink, his lips are so red. Everything looks like really bright and saturated. But let's see for ourselves. So what I'm going to do is go down here into the layers panel and I'm going to go and say make a new solid color. And that's down here in this little kind of circle thing. New solid color. And then I want to make something that is completely neutral gray. So you basically want to put it all the way to the left and somewhere in the middle. And if you want to be really precise, over where it says H, S, and B, you just want to put 0 and 0 and then 50%. And that makes a perfectly neutral gray. And then I'm going to drag that underneath our color swatches so we can kind of just look at them in isolation. So let's move a couple things around here and then we're going to zoom in and let's see what's really going on. Okay, so if you were to just look at these colors on their own, they don't look terribly vibrant. Like they're colorful and you can tell the difference between them and gray, but they're not like, wow, that's so blue, that's so red and vibrant, wow, that's crazy. And this is where the whole like context thing really comes into play. But let's kind of look at these for their data, if you will. So I'm gonna go with like, let's pick this, maybe this blue right here, right? And then I'm gonna open the color picker here. And I just wanna see where it falls in the color picker square, okay? So left and right is how saturated it is, and up and down is how bright and vibrant it is, right? So this blue, which was the dominant color in the whole painting that we're like, wow, so blue. Look at it, it's actually almost gray. It's really dark. Actually, it's like 50% gray, so it's the same value as our background. It's only 43% saturated, right? Like we can clearly tell that it's blue, but outside of the painting, it really just kind of looks like this very, very dull blue. Isn't that interesting? Okay, so let's take a look at, let's go with the red, okay? All right, so this red, yeah, it's a bit more saturated. It's a bit brighter too, okay? So we can see that it's kind of like, it's less in the middle and more up here at the top. But even then, it is not like a very vibrant red. It's almost kind of like a, I don't know, like a bloody red or like an orangey browny kind of red. It doesn't have the same like vibrance as you would think like, oh, and his lips were bright red, you know? Because like, look at that by comparison. This almost looks brown. Okay, and then how about the white over here? Which we can see it's definitely not white. It's almost like a kind of like yellow. But if we open it up, yeah, it's kind of yellow. And it's definitely not pure white. Like it's nowhere near it actually. It's pretty bright, but there's a lot of color in it still. And there's even some like darker values in it. So my point is, you may see a piece of artwork and marvel at the color and be like, wow, it's so bright and blue and crazy, and how'd they do that? But if you take those colors and you sample them and you look at them out of context, you'll see that these are actually kind of like pastel-y or dull, and you wouldn't think that these colors would make up such a like vivid looking figure. So one other thing we can do, right, is let's kind of sample the background and change the context of this, right? So we still have our gray, but I'm gonna pick one of these other like darker colors, maybe just a color around him, maybe like this, sort of like an olive looking color. And then I'll make another solid color and put that behind our color swatches and see what that does. Okay, so zoom in a little. All right, so these look a little brighter, actually. They look a little more vivid, at least the blues do, right? So look at this blue right here, as opposed to over gray, and the blues just kind of like almost start to fade into the gray a little bit. So you can see with very deliberate and careful color choices, you can really make sort of what are pastel looking colors into this very vibrant and rich painting. And that's kind of one of the tricks a lot of painters and illustrators will use, is that you'd be hard pressed to find something that uses 100% pure black and 100% pure white. There's always a little bit of color and a little bit of kind of value play at work here with how the colors bounce off each other and exist relative to one another. Another important point to consider when you're using more than one color is the ratio and balance between them. Striking the right balance will have a significant effect on how your artwork is received. Too much color can easily become a carnival. Not enough might be boring. So what do you do? Here's an illustrated pattern I made as an example of how color balance works. Now this piece uses a complementary color harmony of red and green, and also a couple of neutral tones like dark gray and beige. The red is by far the most dominant color here. It's bright and bold and really kind of demands your attention. Meanwhile, the green is muted and really kind of takes a backseat to the red. And overall, it feels like there's a nice balance going on. But what if the green were just as vibrant as the red? Here's a modified version. Now I've added a lot of saturation back into the green, which is bringing it way forward. But now there's this violent clash between it and the red. And it feels like the green is just overpowering everything. The red has lost all of its presence And even worse, our eyes struggle trying to figure out where to look. This doesn't work nearly as well as the original. And you know what? That makes me sad. All right, let's end this section with some light homework. So here's what I want you to do. Choose an image from an artist you admire and that you think uses color really well. Then bring that image into Photoshop or whatever it is you're using and start sampling the colors from it, just like we did with the painting. Build little swatches for them on a new layer. And then lastly, put a 50% gray background on another layer underneath them. Look at how bright they are, how saturated they are, and where they fall in the color picker. How different do they look out of context? This is a great little exercise you can do with just about any artwork you find. It's like getting a peek into the artist's mind while they were putting them together. And it's especially cool when you color pick from old master paintings. It's just amazing to see what they were doing. Pretty neat stuff.